Welcome to part 2 of my breakdown of the new skill Petrified Blood. In this video I'll start by talking about the newly revealed gem level scaling for Petrified Blood, then expand on Petrified Blood's interactions with other game mechanics, and finally go over some pros and cons of Petrified Blood, things that complement it, and general build ideas. First things first, we finally have info about gem level scaling. This is a level 20, 20% quality, superior Petrified Blood gem. It delays 40% of life loss from hit damage, applying 76% of that life loss over the next 4 seconds. In the previous video, I speculated that the 40% might scale up, hopefully to 59% at level 20. This is not the case. The 40% remains 40% at all gem levels. This is important because the 40% is what determines how much one-shot protection you have. The static 40% figure means that Petrified Blood cannot make a character at half-life more resilient to one-shots than it would be with full life and no Petrified Blood. I'll get to an example in a minute. The fact that only 76% of life loss delayed by Petrified Blood gets applied over time is a very interesting twist. If you aren't sure what this number means, essentially it determines how strong the life loss over time effect from Petrified Blood is. At 100%, all of the life loss delayed by Petrified Blood is lost over time. Below 100%, you actually don't get the full degeneration effect, and you end up losing less life than the amount of damage you take. Again, I'll demystify that in a concrete example. I had speculated on Reddit that the value could scale down with level, and it looks like I ended up being right about that. I'm guessing that the number goes down by 1% per gem level and by 0.25% per 1% quality, at least for the non-alternate quality version of the gem. This lines up with the 76% number that we see on the 2020 gem, and also lines up with my 80% at level 21 prediction. We still don't know what the alternate quality versions of the gem will look like, or what the labyrinth enchantments are. We'll just have to wait to see how impactful those end up being. Okay, so let's modify one of the examples from the previous video to account for a 2020 gem. In this example, you have 2,000 maximum life and 1,000 current life, and are hit for 500 damage. With a level 1 no quality gem, you have the case from the previous video where you take 500 damage, lose 300 life instantly, and lose 200 life over 4 seconds. Now with the 2020 gem, you still take 500 damage immediately, and you still lose 300 life immediately. However, only 76% of the remaining 200 life, in other words 152 life, is lost over the next 4 seconds. Notice that the total life you lost, which is 452, is actually a lower value than the damage you took, which is 500. This is unprecedented in Path of Exile, as previously all instances of damage caused equivalent life loss, unless you were given the Allies Cannot Die aura, or you were a boss with an invulnerability phase. Just to be clear, I want to explain how Petrified Blood would work if the 40% did scale up with gem level. Let's use a fake Petrified Blood gem that delays 60% of life lost instead of 40. For simplicity's sake, let's also assume that the second number remains 100%, so that all delayed life loss is applied over time. Again, using the 500 damage scenario, this time you would lose 200 life instantly, and 300 life over 4 seconds. This is how many people hoped the level 21 gem would look, but this is not how it works. I won't talk about this hypothetical anymore, because I want to focus on what Petrified Blood does, and not on what it does not do. Strictly in terms of one-shot prevention, a level 20 gem is not better than a level 1 gem. Let's look back at this example from the previous video, where a 1,665 damage hit was taken, causing 999 life loss instantly and 666 life loss over 4 seconds. With a 2020 gem, 1,665 damage is still the highest damage you can take from a hit, as that still causes 999 life loss instantly. However, now only 76% of the 666 life loss that is delayed is lost over time. This means you now experience 506 life loss over 4 seconds instead of 666. Notice that with a 2020 gem, the total life you lose from being hit is actually around 10% less than the damage that was taken from the hit. Before I get into my overall evaluation of the skill, I should first expand on Petrified Blood's interactions with certain other game mechanics that I didn't go into detail about in the first video. The first of these is Life Leech. I won't get into all the details of how Leech works here. Many people have requested that I explain Leech, so I'll probably make a separate video about that. Life Leech provides recovery over time that is removed upon reaching maximum unreserved life. If you're leeching life, and reach your maximum life, all instances of Life Leech are removed. If you then lose life, you will need to create new instances of Leech. If you reserve 20% of your maximum life, then 80% of your maximum life is unreserved, and Life Leech stops when you reach 80% instead of 100%. This restriction, where Life Leech stops at maximum unreserved life, can be bypassed using the Slayer's Brutal Fervor node, the Ascendant's Slayer node, the Soul Tether belt, or the Offering to the Serpent gloves. Any of these will allow Leech to persist, even while on full life, so that when you lose life, you can immediately benefit from the existing instances of Leech instead of having to create new ones. If you have less than 50% of your life reserved, then Petrified Blood can effectively cap your life at a value less than its unreserved maximum. For example, if you use Petrified Blood with no reserved life, you can leech up to half life, and leech instances will not be removed because you have not reached your maximum unreserved life, which can only happen through flask recovery. The life leech will continue to attempt to recover life, even if that recovery fails because of Petrified Blood. If you take damage, the existing life leech will immediately start to recover you back up to 50% life. This means you can get persistent leech without having to use any of the 4 options I mentioned earlier. Reserving any amount of life less than 50% of your maximum life is possible without ruining this persistent leech effect. For example, if you reserve 20% of your life, you retain this persistent leech effect because leech fails to recover past 50%, which is still less than your unreserved maximum. However, if you reserve 50% or more of your maximum life, Petrified Blood no longer gives persistent leech, because then you would be able to leech up to your unreserved maximum life, thereby removing all instances of leech. Again, assuming you aren't also using Soul Tether or something. Something I haven't talked about yet is this third line on Petrified Blood, which makes it so that when you're above 50% life, all skills that cost mana also cost life. Specifically, every skill gains a base life cost equal to 40% of its base mana cost. If you don't plan to recover above 50% life anyway, this won't matter much to you. And even if you do plan to use flasks to keep your life topped off, it's unlikely in most cases that you'll really feel the effect of the spent life due to Petrified Blood. One scenario where the life cost might be relevant is if you plan to take advantage of the champion's first to strike, last to fall node, which grants the adrenaline buff for 20 seconds upon reaching low life. With this node and Petrified Blood, you can reserve, for example, 49% of your maximum life, then use a flask to recover to 51%, your unreserved maximum. Then, since you are now not on low life, your skills that normally cost mana also cost life, and using those skills can bring you back to low life, enabling adrenaline. You don't actually need to take damage to trigger adrenaline, since losing life from spending it can make you reach low life. I talked in the last video about how Petrified Blood interacts with Mind over Matter, but there are some tools often used by Mind over Matter builds that have some interesting behavior when combined with Petrified Blood. One such example is Indigon, which applies any non-instant mana recovery from flasks to your life as well. I hinted at this in my last video, but this life recovery can bring you above 50% of maximum life since the recovery comes from a flask. Another mechanic that's commonly used in Mind over Matter builds is the Agnostic, a keystone that drains mana to recover life while not on full life. Unlike Leech, the Agnostic uses your actual maximum life and not your unreserved maximum life. Since the Agnostic's recovery is not from flasks, it cannot apply recovery above 50% life with Petrified Blood. If you are at 50% life with the Agnostic, you will continue to lose 20% of your mana per second, even if the life recovery fails to apply due to Petrified Blood. This interaction is not exclusive to Petrified Blood, since reserving life also prevents you from being on full life, thereby causing the Agnostic's mana drain to never go away. In any case, the only way to stop the Agnostic's mana loss is to recover to full life, which, if using Petrified Blood, is only possible with flasks. A skill commonly used by Mind over Matter builds, and some other builds, is Arcane Cloak, which spends a large percentage of mana to create a new pool of HP that takes damage before life and energy shield, and also adds lightning damage proportional to the mana it spends. I've seen some concerns that Arcane Cloak would cause life loss equal to a percentage of maximum mana, effectively nuking your life bar on a mana stacking build. As such, I asked Mark himself about this. Although Arcane Cloak spends mana, this does not count as a mana cost, and is not affected by modifiers that specifically modify costs. The actual base mana cost of Arcane Cloak is 0. If you have Petrified Blood, are above 50% life, and use Arcane Cloak's base life cost will be 0, since that's 40% of the base mana cost, which is 0. Another thing worth mentioning is cast when damage taken triggers. As I've already mentioned, Petrified Blood does not alter or delay damage dealt. Damage is dealt immediately when hit. All mechanics in the game that check whether you've been damaged, and/or check how much damage was dealt, will use the full damage dealt by the hit when you are hit. If you take 500 damage from a hit, even if that damage ends up being split by Petrified Blood, you are counted as taking 500 damage when the hit is taken. This means that 500 damage is immediately applied toward any cast when damage taken triggers. It also means that any conditional modifiers that check whether you've been damaged recently will start counting when you are hit, and the duration is not reset by the gradual life loss from Petrified Blood. Some viewers have asked me if spending the life cost of a skill benefits from Petrified Blood's life loss splitting mechanic. The answer is no. Spending life causes life loss, but it does not deal damage. Petrified Blood only applies to life loss from damage dealt by a hit. One interesting and very niche interaction is that between Petrified Blood and Savage hits. In Path of Exile, a Savage hit is a hit that causes life loss of at least 15% of maximum life. There are some modifiers in the game that apply when you take a Savage hit, such as the Garukon Pantheon power and the Savage Response notable. Because Savage hits are based on life loss and not damage taken, it's possible for a hit to deal more than 15% of maximum life as damage to your life pool, and for that hit not to be classified as a Savage hit because it doesn't immediately remove 15% of maximum life. The life loss over time is irrelevant because that life loss is technically caused by Petrified Blood itself and not by the hit that was taken. I won't do any specific examples of this because Savage hits are relevant to so few people, so hopefully this short explanation was enough. Okay, Sergeant Minor, we get how it works, but is Petrified Blood actually good? Between Reddit and my own YouTube comments, I've seen opinions ranging from I haven't been this excited to try a new skill in years to this skill is straight trash. As with most things, I think the truth is probably somewhere in between the two extremes. First, I just want to say that I think it makes sense that the gem doesn't scale past 40%. Being on low life is supposed to be a downside. Running around at half-life is inherently a risky playstyle, and Petrified Blood makes that a lot easier to do. Those of us who had hoped it would allow low-life builds to become, in a way, tankier than full-life builds without Petrified Blood were hoping for too much. It's ultimately unreasonable to expect low-life builds to be able to tank harder hits than full-life builds in general. With Petrified Blood at half-life, you can survive a hit dealing up to 83% of your maximum life as damage, which is still a massive improvement over 50%. We shouldn't be looking at Petrified Blood as a universally good defensive mechanic that should easily slot into a wide variety of builds. Rather, it's a situationally good defensive mechanic, explicitly designed to help an archetype that already sacrifices defense for other benefits. Will Petrified Blood actually succeed in bringing in successful life-based low-life builds? I think it probably will. There are significant defensive downsides to playing low-life, but Petrified Blood makes them manageable instead of entirely debilitating. I'm certainly not expecting the low-life Petrified Blood build to become the new immortal archetype. It's just a new way to play low-life, which sacrifices defense for other things. Whether it ends up being worth it in the end depends on your build, and I'm sure it will be for some. This isn't to say that people won't find ways to use Petrified Blood on full-life characters. In fact, it's entirely possible that the dominant playstyle for Petrified Blood will end up being exactly that. Clever exiles will always find ways to play the game in seemingly unintended ways. Never underestimate the ingenuity of the Path of Exile community. As for specific builds, let's use as a baseline what I would consider the intended use case for Petrified Blood, which is a low-life spellcaster build whose entire HP pool consists of the lower half of its life bar. In other words, no mind over matter, no energy shield, and no use of flasks to maintain full life. This is precisely the type of build that was advertised in the marketing for the new league. It's very difficult to judge how these characters will feel to play without doing any testing first, but my instinct is that these characters will work fine. Most of them will probably feel squishier than most full-life builds, but again, this is intended. Since Pain Attunement gives so much damage, perhaps you can invest less elsewhere in offense and get more defense to help offset the defensive weaknesses. Overall, I don't expect these builds to be dominant, but they will be viable. It would certainly be unfortunate if the main archetype used to advertise Ultimatum League ended up being incapable of doing endgame content. Personally, if I were to play a low-life Petrified Blood build this league, I'd probably pair it with Corrupted Soul and some other easy sources of life gained as extra energy shield. The extra HP pool helps mitigate the downside of being on low life, and also scales with maximum life, which you would want to scale anyway. Damage dealt to energy shield will not benefit from the life loss splitting mechanic from Petrified Blood, but it doesn't have to do so in order to be useful. Any additional HP is a good thing on a build whose main downside is cutting its primary HP source in half. I will probably experiment with this at some point in the league, but I don't plan to start the league with a low life build. Another idea I've seen thrown around for Petrified Blood is to go Inquisitor with Pious Path. You take Corrupted Soul to get a small energy shield pool, and get ridiculous amounts of regeneration from Consecrated Ground and other sources of life regeneration. This helps to mitigate the high life loss over time that can come from Petrified Blood. Perhaps with the right amount of investment into regeneration, maximum fire resistance, and life leech, it could even be possible to squeeze in Righteous Fire for an additional spell damage multiplier. Pain Attunement and Righteous Fire together can lead to some really impressive damage. I'd be interested to see how much damage the new Reap skill can deal when converted to elemental damage and paired with these multipliers and the Inquisitor's inevitable Judgment node. I also expect that there will be some melee builds that use Petrified Blood, such as a build that dual-wields Replica Last Resort claws, especially combined with the new Bloodthirst support gem. Each Replica Last Resort provides massive global increases to attack speed, claw damage, and claw accuracy. However, it doesn't have much local weapon damage, but Bloodthirst gives added physical damage based on maximum life. Combine this with other sources of flat physical damage, for example the newly buffed Abyss Jewels, and it should be possible to get some respectable damage out of a build like this. For more synergy, consider playing Champion to take advantage of the adrenaline interaction I alluded to earlier, and also to get an extra Impale if you're playing a pure physical damage build. As for non-low life options, I think the most common way people will try to weave Petrified Blood in is with some sort of Indigon Pathfinder build. These builds typically get insane amounts of both life recovery and mana recovery through Enduring Mana Flasks and Scaling Flask effect. Indigon Pathfinders can get so much recovery that they would shrug off the life loss over time from Petrified Blood easily. At the top end, it seems like the only thing that can kill one of these characters is a one-shot, and Petrified Blood helps prevent those. You just have to figure out what to do with the 35% mana reservation that comes with it and decide whether it's worth it or not. This is by no means an exhaustive list of ideas for Petrified Blood. These are simply a few of the more obvious synergies that I see. If you're looking for fully theory-crafted builds with path of building links, you should probably look elsewhere. I don't feel comfortable recommending builds that I haven't tested myself. If you have any specific questions or ideas you want to bounce off me, I read every comment on my previous video, and will try to continue to do that with this one. I'll probably start posting content in Ultimatum League regarding builds I'm trying out. I tend to play pretty hipster builds, so some will probably fail spectacularly, but for the more successful ones I'll happily make recommendations. I'll also continue to make educational content for Path of Exile. My next video like this will probably be about Leech mechanics. If there's any specific mechanic or interaction that you would personally like me to cover, please suggest it in the comments. Thanks for watching.